Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Morning Live with Aaron Tomlinson. That's me. Um, Looking forward to spending some time with you today. Hope everybody out there is doing well. If you're watching by replay, please let me know that you're watching by replay. And I want to just share some personal stuff today. Share some things on a personal note. I have a birthday coming up next weekend. And most of my adult life, anyway, my birthday has almost been like more like New Year's for me than New Year's. I enjoy January 1st, and I enjoy making New Year's resolutions. I usually try to keep them. Some years I do better than others. Usually I do fairly well, although sometimes it takes a few months for that New Year's resolution to kick in, depending on what it is. But when our birthdays come around, it's always a new year for us. And so I always usually spend some time in August reflecting back on the previous year, where I'm at, and then looking forward about what kind of things do I want to do, stuff like that. And so this is that time of year. My birthday will be on Saturday, so I'll put my Cash App out there for you guys. Anybody that wants to wish me a happy birthday. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that everything is as it should be. Meaning I want to make sure that I'm streaming in all the places that I am supposed to be. So I'm on there. Let's see. Let me just share it to the New Day Global page. I don't know why it says when I sign in that it's going on there, but it never seems to. So let me just share it real quick. Sorry, give me a second. This gives people time to jump on if they want to. Okay, if you read the title, I wanted to talk about are you a seeker or are you a cynic? So what does that have to do with my birthday? And so it was rolling around in my mind this morning when I woke up early, just this whole concept of being a seeker, being a cynic. And I've been in both camps. And so I'm speaking not so much from studying, but from my own experience with this, just to share some thoughts with you guys to help you reflect on yourself and think about where you're at in the journey. And then you can make a choice if you're a seeker or a cynic or somewhere in between. You can kind of make more of a conscious choice about which one that you want to be and continue with if you're in one of those camps already. So what does this have to do with my birthday coming up and with the past and the future? So I'm going to rewind about a year. And last year at this time, I was not feeling well. I had been to the doctor a couple of different times. My symptoms were, I thought fairly mild. Short of breath, definitely out of shape. Going for any kind of a walk would leave me winded. I remember not last spring, but the spring before last, spring of 2024, planting I think it was just 3 trees, and digging those holes just left me incredibly winded. Spraying for weeds would leave me incredibly winded. And I started to develop a pretty chronic cough that I thought was probably related to allergies or something like that. I also was on oxygen at night because I had a smidgen of sleep apnea. I had been tested for that, I think the year before that. And so I had some oxygen that I was using at night to try to address that. And that seemed to stop working. I would frequently wake up feeling like I couldn't breathe. There were times when I would go to sleep And just as I would start to fall asleep, I would feel like I couldn't breathe. The way I described it when I went to the doctor both times was like whatever it was in my brain that was supposed to tell me to breathe when I fell asleep, it felt like it wasn't working. It felt like it took conscious effort to breathe. As a consequence of that, I really wasn't sleeping. Um, I had been doing a intermittent fasting diet for several months and wasn't losing weight. And again, I just chalked this all up to getting old. That's what the doctor said. Well, you're getting older. I have a sedentary lifestyle, sedentary job where I sit most of the day. And so, I thought, okay, it makes sense. I'm gaining or not losing the weight, even though I'm trying to lose weight. I'm not losing the weight because of, you know, hormonal changes or whatever it is that we go through at this stage of life. And I was just, at a stage of life where I, I was just frankly out of shape, but I really didn't feel well. And I would make the comment that I felt like I was dying. But we had, uh, y- you know, done deep cleaning, stuff like that, to see if maybe there was an irritant, dust in the air or whatever. I'd done all kinds of different things to address it. So my birthday is August 30th. So August 29th, I go to the doctor again and I ask if I can get tested for asthma because I was coughing and I wasn't breathing very well. If I could get tested again for sleep apnea and see what was going on there. And the first time I went to the doctor in the beginning of August or end of July, I can't remember which, I was having anxiety attacks that would just come out of nowhere for no reason. And so the conclusion that the healthcare provider, nurse practitioner, determined was that I was just suffering from some midlife anxiety or something like that, and suggested that she suggested that I go to counseling. Now, I have nothing against counseling. I've done counseling. I did counseling for 2 years straight. Um, Back before 2 or 3 years straight, every week, back before the pandemic. But that just didn't, it didn't feel right. And when you're a counselor, you kind of feel like you need to go to someone that at least knows as much as you do. And at any rate, I passed on the counseling. So I went back on the 29th and asked if I could get tested for asthma, adult onset asthma. And they're like, no, that's extremely rare. They tested me. I didn't do great on the tests, where you blow into the thing. Any of you that ever been tested for that stuff. And essentially I was told, this is August 29th. Essentially I was told, if you don't feel better uh, in a month, come back and see me again and we'll run some more tests. And they had done blood tests and various different things. There was things in my blood work that got missed. There was just a whole lot of missteps there. I can understand why people become disenfranchised with our medical system. There's a lot of things about our medical system that really sucks. And so I can, get on board with that. I can appreciate that. So that was the day before my birthday. And then on the day of my birthday, I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't anything new. I hadn't been feeling well for a few months, but it did feel like I was progressively getting worse. I was taking, over the counter stuff for allergies and stuff like that. And I had really begun to lose my appetite. And on my birthday specifically, I just couldn't eat anything. Um, Not even soup. I couldn't even eat soup. Didn't have any birthday cake. Went to bed and had a really difficult night's sleep where I kept waking up short of breath, waking up, not being able to breathe. and I don't always tell this part of the story, but I might as well since I'm coming up on a year. So I wake up in the morning on the 31st, having not slept. And I think to myself, I don't know if insomnia is a medical emergency, but it sure feels like one because I haven't had a full night's sleep in weeks. And I was just absolutely exhausted. And so I sometimes sleep better in the mornings. So I had awakened I suppose about the time the sun was coming up, and I decided I was going to roll over and try and get more sleep. And I had sort of this hypnagogic experience. So the hypnagogic state is it's like a daydream state, or it's the state that you go in right before you fall asleep or right after you wake up. So you're essentially dreaming, but you're still lucid and conscious and awake. And I had this little miniature dream where there were these guys. That's the only thing I know. The only thing I remember is like these guys that, and this voice that came in on the left side of me that said, Aaron, if you go back to sleep, you'll be lost and they will never find you. And I thought, it kind of jerked me awake. And I thought, well, that's crazy. I mean, I'm right here in bed. That doesn't, I mean, because it felt like a real warning, you know? And so I'm processing it in that state. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I fall asleep, I'm still going to be here in the bed. What do you mean they won't find me? So I dismissed it and rolled over to go back to sleep. And it happened again. And then again, I reasoned the same way. Excuse me. Sorry. I reasoned the same way. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And I rolled over and I went back to sleep. And that happened. When that happened the third time, I decided, well, I better get up. Excuse me, just a second. Frog in my throat. Sorry about that. Interesting that I'm talking about this. I haven't had any of these kinds of troubles in a while. Maybe it's just a body memory. And so I decide to get up. I walk across the room, essentially, and I can feel my heart racing, and I'm out of breath, and I have to sit down. And so we had one of those, little oximeter things that you put on your finger, and my heart rate was beating at about 149 beats per minute, and my oxygen was below 90. I don't remember what it was, if it was 86, 85, 86, something like that. So we're like, okay, time to go to the emergency room. So honestly, I thought they would probably just give me some steroids to help me breathe, open up my lungs, and I would go home. I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought. So in fact, I show up at the emergency room, and my wife takes me to the emergency room, and I didn't even think she needed to go. Like, she and the kids had something they were doing that particular Saturday. And so I told them to just go ahead and go, and I would just take myself and, crazy stuff. So she wisely takes me to the emergency room. It's very small hospital. It's an orthopedic hospital with an emergency room that's in our community, which means the parking lot at Walmart or your local grocery store is bigger than the parking lot at the emergency room. So she parks the car and walks in. So however long it takes her to do that, they had already gotten me back to a room, which surprised her. She thought I'd be waiting in the waiting room. And there was already 3, maybe 4 people in the emergency room checking my vital signs and hooking me up to an EKG. And she sits down, and the doctor was there, and the doctor was looking very concerned. And the first thing the doctor says was that I was in atrial fibrillation. I didn't even know what that was. I'd heard the term, but I didn't know what it was. And then had the conversation with us, wanting to know what my requests were, if they had to revive me. Did I want procedures taken in order to revive me? They'd hooked me up to an IV. And, we'd never really thought about a DNR, whatever. Had been healthy. It's the first time I'd been to the emergency room since I was 9 years old. Fortunately for me, I've been pretty healthy, avoided any serious injuries or accidents, things like that. So last time I was in the emergency room was to get stitches when I was 9 years old. And so here I am, 15 minutes into it, and they're already talking to me about, do you want to be resuscitated? So I still didn't know how bad a shape I was in. So next thing I know, they're strapping me to a gurney and putting me in an ambulance to transfer me to another hospital where they had a room, a room waiting for me. And what they had told me was that they were going to do a esophageal echocardiogram where they go down. Goodness gracious, excuse me one second. Okay, think I think I cleared my throat. All right, so they were gonna do this esophageal echocardiogram where they go in through your throat, they knock you out, they go in through your throat, and they look at your heart. And then if everything checks out okay, they would do what's called an electrocardioversion, where they shock your heart and get it to beat back in a normal rhythm. And so that was the expectation that I went in with. They did just a regular echocardiogram, which was external, and came back a little bit later and said that I was in heart failure and that I had blood clots in one of the atriums. They call it sort of the attic of the heart. They said I had a bunch of blood clots that had filled up in there, and so they couldn't do the shock treatment because it had the potential of kicking loose some of those blood clots, which would have killed me. So I'm essentially in atrial fibrillation. My upper chambers were beating anywhere from 140 to 190, I think was the highest reading that I had seen, and blood clots in my heart. And I was in very severe chronic heart failure. In fact, it was the worst type of congestive heart failure that you can possibly have. So they measure the activity in the heart by looking at the fraction of blood that leaves the heart on a single pump, and that's called the ejection fraction. And generally, anything considered below 55% of the blood leaving the heart is considered heart failure. So I want you to think about the numbers here. Anything below, let's say 60%, anything below 55. 55 is considered normal. I think there's a range, 55 to 75. If some of you are medical people, I know there are some that watch. Feel free to put in the comments, what's normal. But anything below 55 is considered or can be considered heart failure. Anything below 35%, which means only 35% of the blood's leaving the heart, is considered severe heart failure. Anything below 25% is considered very severe heart failure. And anything lower than 25% is considered an imminent death. Cardiac arrest is the next stage, the next place the heart has to go and adapt. And I was below 20%. So less than 20% of the blood was leaving my heart with each pump. So that's how hard my heart was working, which is, I presume, also the reason that the upper chambers were working so hard, beating so fast. And yeah. Oh, and the weight gain. I also had a edema. So when I was in the hospital, they put me on diuretics to clear the fluid. So I had fluid building up in my lungs. The reason I couldn't eat was it was filling my stomach, basically filling up my entire midsection. So what I thought was middle-aged weight gain was actually water retention. So I'd had this water retention for a long time. So I had been in this condition for a really long time. It should have gotten caught the first time I went and saw the doctor. If for no other reason, there are markers in the blood that show or indicate heart failure, and mine were off the charts high. All of this got missed for whatever reason. The atrial fibrillation, the doctors told me, was easily heard through a stethoscope. But anyway, for whatever reason, it was missed initially. And so I got myself into this very chronic medical emergency and had to spend all of Labor Day weekend in the hospital. And I lost 20 pounds, if you can imagine, 20 pounds of fluid in, I think, 4 days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever it was, in the hospital. And they sent me home on about, 10 different medications. Some of them I was taking multiple times a day. I think I'd counted 15 or 16 pills a day that I was taking. And And the following weekend, I was feeling better. I was feeling so much better when I got out of the hospital. But the following weekend, we decided to try to do something for my birthday, and I could barely walk a block. So every medical professional that I have talked to has said that, I was definitely in a state probably of imminent death and something that could have occurred um, at any point in time after, because of the blood clots that were residing in the heart. So they give you blood thinners to address the blood clots, but it doesn't break up the blood clots. It just prevents future blood clots from happening. And so what it does is it's the blood thinners stop the clotting so that the body can absorb the clots. But that takes about 3 months time to do that. So I'm kind of like a walking time bomb with these blood clots. And later the cardiologist told me that we were really fortunate that one of those blood clots didn't break loose in the heart. And in the meantime, I was still in atrial fibrillation because all the medication, IVs and stuff that they had given me wasn't reversing it and putting me back into a normal heart rhythm. And the next time I had my ejection fraction checked was November 1st. And on November 1st, I was still at 35%. So remember, I said anything below 35% is still considered severe heart failure, even though my heart was able, even at that percentage, I was at 33%. Even that percentage was able to keep up with my body's needs. So technically, it wasn't considered heart failure. So anyway, I'm just painting the picture for you of what happened. And so I didn't talk about it. I would mention it to a few people, and it's amazing, what some people's response was encouraging. I had a friend that happened to, and they're, 10 years later, they're doing fine. And then I heard a lot of stories of, within a year that person had died. One of the providers, I think it was one of the nurses in the hospital, told me I had the heart of an 80-year-old man. And then I've told a number of doctors that worked in the emergency room or intensive care unit, stuff like that. My situation, I described it to one doctor in urgent care. I had to go in for a minor injury that I had obtained at work. So they wanted me to go get checked out. And she says, "You had angels on your shoulder for sure." And I kind of chuckled and I said, "Yeah." And she looked at me very seriously. She said, "No, you had angels on your shoulder." So it was quite a challenge. It was quite a wake-up call. And now I'm able to look back on it and see it as a gift. So I'm happy to say that I won't be able to do a video next weekend. Next weekend is Labor Day weekend. It's my birthday weekend. And we were able to find a 5K that we're going to do as a family on the 31st on Sunday. Starts at 10 a.m. So I'll be doing a 5K instead of doing this as a way to sort of celebrate the victory together as a family on the exact anniversary of my, I guess you could call it, near-death experience, even though I didn't have a typical near-death experience. So suffice it to say, in a year's time, in July, I started going back to the gym, and I want to say October, and it was rough getting back in shape, but I've been consistent with it, changed my diet, changed some other habits, got more into meditation and some stuff like that. I did all the natural stuff. I want to stress that at the beginning. If it had not been, so we can talk about the negative side, the dark side, if you will, of our healthcare system. And certainly, we can have a really long conversation about that. We can be cynics about that for sure. And I can get on board with that. But if it hadn't been for modern Western medical, conventional medicine, I wouldn't be here today. It was the medicine that they gave me in the hospital. It was the medicines that I was taking that helped me to be able to reverse this condition, so much so that I'm completely off of medication. The doctor, I've been on blood pressure medicine for a while, but a long time prior to this event. And I saw my cardiologist and last week, and he mentioned that he doesn't even think that I have hypertension or need the blood pressure medicine. So completely off of medication. And in July, I swam 5 miles to raise money for cancer. Some of you donated for that. I really appreciate that. Um, So, Aaron, you've told us all this before. Why are you telling us this again? Well, for some people that maybe haven't heard the story, also, I had shared my testimony after the doctors had taken me off of medication a couple of months ago. And a lot of people shared that video to help and encourage people that were also facing severe medical crises. And so I wanted to kind of redo it. I felt it was appropriate since I'm not going to be able to do it on the actual anniversary. I'm going to be running a 5K. So I'm in the best shape of my life. Well, I can't say I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm in the best shape of my second half of my adult life. And I literally feel better. And I think in a lot of respects look better than I did when I was 30. I mean, I genuinely feel like I'm 30 years old again. I was Tiana Galgano, who is someone that helped me through this process. I'll probably talk about her a little bit. But she did a workshop a couple of months ago. I think it was in July. It was the first weekend of July on healing. And everybody in the room had to come up with a condition that they wanted to heal. And when it got to me, I genuinely, I couldn't think of anything. I didn't have any pain, didn't have any medical issues to work on. So, yeah, it really is, without me overstating it, a miraculous recovery. So, but a big part of that was following conventional medicine and also knowing, okay, got to eat right, got to exercise, got to do all the things that we know that we should all be doing, right? But for some reason, it takes someone like me, a serious health crisis, to accomplish that. So I want to talk about, so now I can look at this like it was a gift rather than a crisis. At the time, it didn't feel like that. So I want to just walk you through what that healing process, what that looked like for me, and why it was such a wake-up call for me. One of the things that you realize when you have an incident like that, where you come close to death, whether it's a traditional near-death experience or an accident, or you escape a tragedy, or in my case, medically, you come really close to your final day, it does give you a different perspective. It just does. We're human beings. That's what happens to us in those situations for a lot of people. And this was certainly true in my case. And one of the things, this is going to sound cynical, talking about being a seeker or a cynic, but one of the really powerful realizations that I got was how few people, and I'm not saying this from a victim stance at all, it's just a reality. It's something that I think we need to think about. But we spend so much of our time and energy pouring ourselves into other people, even if you're not in the helping profession. It could be just, we don't want to rock the boat. We're trying to manage our relationships. We're worried about our reputation. We're worried about what people think about us. We're worried about the stuff that people say. We get into petty arguments over anything from politics to religion to health to anything, especially on social media and the social media culture, right? And we can spend so much time and energy. I used to put so much time and energy into responding to comments, not in an, let me say it this way. I used to put so much time and energy in responding to negative or contrarian comments and getting into arguments with people and stuff like that. And you really do begin to have a different perspective and realize how we put so much energy into this stuff when at the end of the day, if we die, doesn't matter to us anyway. But here's the point I want to make. Shockingly, we don't matter as much to people as we think. Very few people are going to be thinking about you or me after we pass away. That doesn't mean that people close to us aren't going to feel pain or trauma because of the loss, because they are. One of the most traumatic things that we can go through in life is the death of a loved one, the death of someone close to us. It's one of the most painful experiences that we can have. But for most people, for the vast majority of people, life goes on for them. Some people, it may take, depending on the person that they lost, it may take a few years, but eventually, even for those closest to us, life goes on. For most people that have a memorial service or a funeral, they'll talk about you, they'll say nice things, they'll grieve, they'll cry, they'll hug it out. For some people, like I don't remember my mother's funeral at all, because there was still so much shock there for me when my mother passed. But we did go and have a nice dinner after at the reception. So I think when we were driving home from the hospital after she died, it's like, where did we go eat? Your employers, certainly, people are going to grieve, they're going to feel the hurt, and they're going to post your position, and they're going to replace you. And so for me, that was really powerful to realize in a good way, because it can be so hard for us, especially those of us that are idealists. I am definitely an idealist. And what I mean by idealist is those of us that think the best in people, the best about life. We have an idealistic view of our lives. Then we can end up waiting. And by waiting, I mean gaining weight versus sitting in a waiting room. We can end up giving too much weight to other people's opinions and other people's thoughts about us. We can give too much weight to our deadlines at work. We can give too much weight to that person on social media that blocked us or unfriended us or whatever the case may be. And for me, it was a realization that I needed to adjust my energy and channel more of that energy into creating not just the kind of life that I want, meaning circumstantially, how much money do I want to make? What do I want my relationships to be like? How do I want to feel? How long do I want to live? What's my longevity, et cetera, and so on. I'm not just talking about circumstantially, but also deciding exactly how we want to show up in life, the kind of person that we want to be, the kind of contributions, if any, that we want to make to this world or to the people that are important to us in our lives. So I was given this tremendous gift to be able to have this wake-up call. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing, I need to explain my background. So my background as a pastor and as really a Christian from the time I was 18 years old was a pursuit. I was on a seeker's path. Even when I was in the church, I was on a seeker's path. And I was always bucking the system, bucking the trends. I never really fit into the evangelical world. In fact, I would spend so much time and energy trying to differentiate myself from the system, from the religion, not being religious, but having relationships, stuff like that. I put so much time and energy into it. Then I got so tired of telling people that I was a pastor, because the way they would change in the way that they would talk and relate, even if it was someone that I just met, if I was traveling to the mission field or something and it was on the airplane, what are you doing? Where are you going? Just kind of those normal conversations that we used to have on the airplanes before everybody had their tablets and headphones and whatever. I've just noticed the last few times I've traveled, there's been a lot less of those kind of conversations. But back in those days, you didn't have all that stuff. And so you would talk to each other. And I got to where I started to tell people that I was a motivational speaker or that I was into self help. And then later, when I got into psychology and counseling, then it became easier to just say that that's what I was doing, or I'm going to speak at a leadership conference, that kind of stuff, to try to steer it away from the religious stuff, because that's how much I didn't want to identify with it. Yet I was very spiritual, and I did have a very personal and powerful relationship with God, with spirit, with a higher power. And as a result of that, and as a result of really dedicating my life for since I was, 20, 21 years old, to finding real, tangible, powerful answers from the Bible, from spirit, from relationship with God, that could deliver the goods, that could produce the results. And it did. And one of the results that it produced for us was miraculous healings, people being healed of all kinds of different things that medical science wasn't able to address or able to heal. And yet we would see people healed with blind eyes, lots of deaf ears, lots of frozen shoulders, lots of people that had been in chronic pain from injuries for some of them even decades, being instantly healed in healing services and miracle services, people with stage 4 cancer being healed, people with all kinds, just about every condition you can think of. I had substantial experience helping other people receive their healing. And I did this as a pastor. I didn't do this as a televangelist. I didn't do this as a traveling person that just went in. I used to say, churches would bring in these speakers or these evangelists, these signs and wonders guys that would blow in, blow up, and blow out, meaning they didn't have to walk out whatever it was that they were teaching with other people to see if it was really producing results and to see if it was really being effective. And so I was always very pragmatic. And so that kept me on the path of a seeker. And so I knew, I'm like, okay, this is what they're telling me. They told me in December that I would be on all these medications at the cardiologist. They told me I'd be on all these medications for the rest of my life. That was in December. By July, they had taken me off of them, with the exception of some blood pressure medication. So I had said previously I was off all the medication. What I meant was all the extra medication that I hadn't been taking for years to manage blood pressure. And then when I was at the cardiologist this last time, they said, we don't really think you have high blood pressure or hypertension or anything like that. So think about that. In December, they said, you're going to be on all these medications the rest of your life. And here we are in August. So just 8 months removed from that, and I'm completely off medication, swam 5 miles, work out several times a week, and going to do a 5K next weekend on the anniversary of it. So complete reversal of my condition, and I'm in better health today than I was years before I even went into the hospital. And so I began this. So they're saying, this is going to be your condition. It's incurable. If you look it up on the internet, it's incurable. The survival rates of people whose ejection fraction gets so low is really, really minimal. And usually it's managed with medication for the rest of your life. And usually it shortens your life expectancy, all that kind of stuff, right? I'm just trying to validate that there was something miraculous that happened, because there was. So when I have talked about, if you followed me or watched me over the years, and I've talked about, my experience in the church, my experience with healing, my experiences with miracles and stuff like that. It's also something that I was able to return to, the principles. I was able to return to them and deliver the goods and have a testimony that says, yes, this stuff absolutely works. But I also had the advantage of having had those experiences, which I realized for most people, especially people in the deconstruction community, even if you came from a charismatic or Pentecostal tradition that believed in healing and believed in the present day ministry of the Holy Spirit and all of these sorts of things, oftentimes never saw anything that delivered the goods. They were still just feeding upon doctrines and philosophy and morality, but not really tapping into the potential, the real potential that is there for life transforming and powerful experiences that comes from genuine, healthy spirituality. And so what a lot of us did, what I would say is that uh, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. When you're deconstructing, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that baby in the bathwater isn't necessarily a relationship with Jesus, and it isn't necessarily anything to do with Judeo-Christian beliefs. It is spirituality in general. And in the academic circle, spirituality is defined as a personal thing, as personal devotion and connection to a higher power, whatever that higher power may be. So, back to the 12-step program that has been proven to work over the years. And so there were a lot of people. So, as we're going through this deconstruction stuff, it starts out. Now, I don't know how, if you have any kind of religious background or got into the church and you deconstructed, I don't know what put you in the church to begin with. For a lot of people, they were just raised in it. It was just part of being a part of a certain family or a certain culture or a certain tradition. And so went to church all their lives and just kept going to church. For some people, they had some kind of conversion experience. If you had some kind of conversion experience, like I did when I was 17 or 18 years old, that conversion experience came about as the result of being a seeker. You were seeking for something. And I can honestly say, when I became radically saved, I was seeking for something. And just like the Bible says, if you seek, you shall find. And so I found something. I found something that had value for me and that worked for me. And not only that had value for me and worked for me, but had value, and I'm not exaggerating when I say had value for thousands of other people and worked for thousands of other people. And I can say that because I did many, many meetings over the years in lots of different places. And some of those meetings, there were 10 to 15,000 people that were there. Usually the crowds were smaller than that, a few hundred people, but I did miracle services for thousands of people. I had prayed for thousands of people and seen them get results, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. Results that science can't explain, that defy physicalism. And this is one of my frustrations with a lot of what I see with the spiritual community, people who have deconstructed, and they either end up in physicalism and materialism and atheism, or they end up with a form of spirituality that does not have power with it, that cannot deliver the goods, that can't really bring powerful healing effects and life-transforming content or power into their lives. So it's no different than being in a dead, dusty, dry old church. The only thing that's changed is now you have maybe a different sense of right and wrong, or you have more, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. So the baby, when we say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, the baby is spirituality for some people, if they had it to begin with. But a lot of people in the church, they didn't have it. So the baby in this case could be the seeking, could be the seeker. Because nobody deconstructed that wasn't seeking answers, that wasn't seeking information. Maybe what I've been taught, maybe what I've been told is all wrong. Maybe hell isn't a real place. And maybe this God who endorses genocide in parts of the Bible and wants to relegate his creation to eternal conscious torment because they didn't get their history lesson right about the person of Jesus. Maybe that God doesn't exist. Maybe the Bible isn't the inerrant word of God, true from Genesis to the maps, making accurate statements in all things, spiritual and scientific, and moral and cultural. Maybe it isn't the final authority. See, these are the layers of deconstruction. For me, it was God wasn't this angry God who had to Well, if I back up, actually, for me, it was the rapture. I quit believing in the rapture in the 90s, and I crack up at all the stuff, like how it just keeps recycling and recycling and making these people millions of dollars selling different versions of the same old thing. And I still see it today, although not as much as I used to, probably because I don't have that kind of following anymore. But there's four blood moons, or it's the Feast of Tabernacles, Jesus coming back, whether it's date setting or whether it's not a specific day and time, but a time frame in which we can expect these prophetic events to occur. I never bought into that stuff. I mean, I did, like, during the first Gulf War, I bought into it big time. I read Hal Lindsey's books. That's taken some of you back, probably. It's when Iraq invaded Kuwait. There was one called The Rise of Babylon. And then a few years later, it gets reprinted and rebranded. Same book, same title, same cover, only it's reprinted now around after 9/11 had happened, and the European Union, all that stuff. I didn't buy into that stuff. And I was always vilified by the system for not buying into that. And then this idea of substitutionary atonement, that Jesus had to die because God was angry and that was the only way that your sins could be forgiven, deconstructed from that, deconstructed from the idea of hell, deconstructed from the idea of the inerrancy of Scripture and all these various different things. All of that comes about from seeking, from saying, I don't have all the answers, I don't know everything, but there's a hunger inside me, there's something inside of me that is driving me to be a seeker. That's very different than being a cynic. So what is a cynic? A cynic has become certain. They've thrown the baby of seeking out with the bathwater of whatever system that they have left, and feed themselves upon just a bunch of negativity about Jesus, about Christianity, about whatever it is, right? And become cynical. So, for example, I'm going to throw one out here, and I know this is going to piss some people off, but hey, that's new for me. I've talked a lot about healing. What I haven't talked about, what I've shied away from, is the financial empowerment that I also experienced by applying the principles of the prosperity message and the prosperity gospel. Now, I realize there are a lot of bad actors out there that have used principles from the Bible of financial empowerment to steal from widows and orphans and empower themselves and build these big kingdoms, et cetera, and so on. I understand that. And usually the bad actors become the most visible. But I can tell you, after traveling the world and being involved in those types of ministries for a couple of decades, that personally, the only bad actors that I can think of that I know personally are the ones that got the most fame and fortune from it. But the vast majority of people at a grassroots level are just trying to find answers, not just for physical health and longevity, but also for financial empowerment. In other words, if spirituality works, if spirituality is real, then it needs to be working in every area of our lives. We need to be able to look at something like a physical challenge where science says this is it, this is the end, and say, no, we have access to resources. See, spirituality is about access to resources that transcend physical limitation. That's all it is. I'm going to say that again. Spirituality is about having access to resources that transcend physical and material limitations, that transcend Newtonian models of cause and effect, sort of the billiard ball model of everything just kind of knocking around and probabilities creating results. And then it's wherever our ball is on the table and whatever's knocking around us that determines whether or not our ball gets sunk. And there are powerful, powerful financial principles that we probably need more than ever today. So I was fortunate to come from a family that had plenty to experiencing absolute poverty. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being insensitive to people that have absolute poverty, to absolute poverty. And then right around the time that I'm supposed to launch into a career and make all these big decisions and whatever, and had no natural means of support, and so had to lean into these principles of prosperity and lean into these principles of financial empowerment that I was finding in scripture, like giving and receiving, like sowing and reaping, like have a need, plant a seed. And it worked in crazy ways. So many, I've probably got as many financial synchronicities and miracles that I can talk about that I've experienced in my own life or that other people have experienced as I've had on physical level, or other kinds of synchronicities and guidance that have come from spiritual empowerment, that have come from seeking. But the cynic is going to say that anybody that's attending one of those churches is just a dumb sheep. They're just a dumb sheep that's getting shorn every Sunday. And the cynic develops this attitude that is very fundamentalist, that is very much like the very thing that they are attacking, because they presume to know in an all or nothing sort of way, well, that's all garbage. And boy, I mean, and that's why I said I know I'm going to piss some people off with this, because boy, the anger and the sense of injustice that people have from that, and rightfully so, if you are not actually being taught how to manifest in the financial arena out of spiritual resources, meaning you're not limited to your paycheck. You're not limited to your social security check. You're not limited to all these various different things. And it can come in a lot of different ways. But there, and I would, you know, just trying to perfect these things, I would play with these things. One of the really funny ones, there is truth to the law of reciprocity. When Jesus said, given it shall be given unto you. When Jesus said, if you judge, judgment will come back. If you show mercy, mercy will come back. It's not an infallible law. There are multiple things that are at work there, but it is a powerful principle that does work. Doesn't mean it works every time for everybody all the time. But if you develop a lifestyle of that, it will work for you. And I can say that with confidence, because in the same way that we helped people manifest healing, we helped people manifest on this financial side of it as well. And one of the funny ones was, one of the principles that we used to teach was that every seed reproduces after its own kind. And so when you give, when you have a generous lifestyle and you give either towards something or a specific type of giving seed, then it will come back to you. So when we were getting out of debt, we found people that needed to get out of debt, and we gave to them to help them get out of debt. And then we had provision that came from unexpected places that would help us get out of debt. But one of the funniest ones was, I remember one time I had this favorite tie. I think it was a tie that my mother had given to me. I loved this tie. This was back when we had to wear them for work. You know, this was back before casual. This was back even before Casual Friday. Now it's just casual every day. But this was, you know, back in the day, dating myself. And I just felt this impression, give this preacher your tie. And we're with a group after church. So I take the tie off and I said, I'm supposed to give this to you. And he looked at it and he kind of, this guy was a real jerk. Not the kind of, you know, not a bad actor, just a jerk, just no people skills. He looks at the tie and he goes, and he hands it to someone and gives it to someone else. And immediately I felt offended and I wanted my tie back. But I realized, in line with these principles, that if I got an attitude about it, it wasn't going to work. So I changed my attitude right away. I had to work, you know, added a little bit, but I got to the point that I could really feel good about giving that tie, and the fact that he gave that tie to someone else, I could really feel good about that. And I got to tell you, man, when I finally when it became clear, suits and ties are out, shirts and ties are out, even on the workplace, I had, I don't know, I'll be conservative and say scores of ties. And very few of those ties did I ever buy. I had someone bring me a bag of ties just out of the blue. They were cleaning out their closet or something, said, here you go. Want you to have these. This is before I was pastoring, by the way. I had occasions at work. I remember one guy, I was in sales, and I looked at one of the other salespeople. I was about 23 at the time. This was after that had happened. And I said, man, I really like your tie. Just giving a genuine compliment. And he took it off right then and gave it to me. That's happened to me over and over and over and over. Now, just a coincidence? That's what the cynic's going to say. Just the law of large numbers, that there's bound to be some coincidences and synchronicities. But see, they just become cynical about it. Somebody talks about, seeing Jesus in a vision or something. Well, that wasn't really Jesus. That was just your higher self. That was just an aspect of you. If you still try to have a relationship with Jesus, you're just in some form of amnesia, or worse, they try to play clinical psychologist and tell you you've got some kind of dysfunction or whatever. And so we just say, when we're saying that it's all garbage, when we're saying that there's nothing redeemable about it, we've moved into the position of a seeker, because there's nothing left to seek. There's nothing left to know. My experience is all there is. So if I didn't experience giving and receiving, if I didn't experience the receiving end of it after giving, if I didn't experience answer to prayers regarding finances, if I didn't experience anything that's paranormal, if that was true for me, then that's true of all of it. And so what they end up doing is they're just simply projecting. They're just projecting themselves. They're actually doing the same thing that they're being critical of. And if they were in ministry and they came out of ministry, they're still just projecting themselves onto people. All that's happened is that they've changed the image that they're projecting. This is true for me, so therefore it's true for all. And I will resist and be against any evidence to the contrary. That's exactly what we did in religion. So if somebody says, I had a supernatural healing, well, there's got to be a natural explanation for that. If somebody says, I had a visitation from Jesus, well, that couldn't have been Jesus. You see what I'm saying? So now we're no longer a seeker, we're a cynic. And in order for me to heal, I had to come back to being a seeker, and I had to begin with the assumption that I am not bound by physical limitations. But that option was only available to me on the table because I had not thrown out the baby with the bathwater. The option of prayer was only available to me because I had maintained belief in the power of prayer from the results that I had seen in the past. Sure, it's easy to become a cynic, especially when you post anything that might be helpful or that might be truth. Like when Jesus talks about hell, he's speaking in hyperbole, and he's talking about a physical place in Jerusalem, right? And so you say there is no really even biblical evidence for this place called hell. And then you have these, Christians that come back and say, oh, no, you're just deceived by the devil. It's the same thing. They're doing the same thing. Put posts out there, and if you think I'm talking about you, I'm not. I'm talking about myself. So if anybody out there thinks I'm going after somebody, one of my friends or someone in the deconstruction community, you couldn't be more wrong, and you're a cynic. Because you're assuming that I'm doing like whatever you think everybody's doing. You've made it a universal principle. No, I'm talking about myself. I'm saying that I got into this cynical place. I got into this cynical place where I didn't pray. I got into this cynical place where I didn't develop my spiritual life anymore, or even rely or depend upon my spiritual life. I got into this cynical place where, oh yeah, that prosperity stuff, it's all garbage. I got into this cynical place where, and so you'll put something out there, like I said, like about hell. People come back at you and say, you're deceived by the devil. You're wrong. You poor little lost sheep. that doesn't know the truth, and then end up doing the same thing with people that are still in the system or still have a spiritual relationship with Christ. Well, if you saw Christ, well, that wasn't Christ. That was just your imagination, because there is no God, and this is all there is. When you say that, you now have moved into a position where you are no longer a seeker. Now, not everybody, this isn't a binary choice. Not everybody that isn't a seeker naturally becomes a cynic, but a lot of us do. And I did. I became very much a cynic and began to look for answers in all kinds of science and scholarship and things like this. All of that knowledge that's bound by physical limitations. And then last year, I face a challenge in my life where if I am stuck in just the physical limitations, it's game over. Which, that's going to happen to everybody. That's okay for me, but that's not okay for my children. And it didn't dawn on me when I talked to one of my children about, being in the hospital and stuff. And my child said to me, I felt like I was cursed. Like if my dad dies when I'm this age, that's a curse on me. That affects them. So the imperative to get well, the imperative for longevity wasn't just about me. It wasn't about my health. It was about the people that I care for. It was about the people that are important to me in my life and that I am important to them. And so I was able to begin from this assumption, say, okay, I can access spirit. And that's the terminology I prefer to use now. For a long time, talk about consciousness. Okay. Flashback about a year ago, laying in bed after I get home. It's like, okay, I know there is a consciousness that is base reality. I'm convinced of that. So I know physicalism isn't going to limit me. That's where I had to begin. I'm not limited by the percentages of people that survive this. I'm not limited to that small number because I'm not limited to the only physical resource. My only avenue to address this is not within medical science. But by the same token, I'm not going to be a cynic, say all big pharma is bad, all medical science is bad, all of that. See, that's cynicism. It's not an either or choice. Either I'm trusting God, faith healing, placebo effect, whatever you want to call it, or I'm taking medicine and going that route. No, you can do both. You really can. You can do both. And so we can deconstruct and then become cynics. We can think every politician is out for themselves and a bad actor. So cynicism paints with a broad brush, right? So every preacher that teaches any kind of prosperity, they're just stealing from these poor people. And so somehow it's my mission to rescue these poor people who are stuck in this system so that they can be free. Do you see how it's the same thing? It's the same thing as dogmatic spirituality or dogmatic religion. It's just, now it's dogmatic physicalism. It's dogmatic atheism. It's dogmatic non-dualism. It's a projection. And so I had to change my shoes. I had to take off the mindset of a cynic. If I had stayed stuck in the mindset of a cynic, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I certainly wouldn't be running a 5K next Sunday and off all of my medication and feeling better than I felt in decades if I'd have been a cynic. So I had to come back to being a seeker. What are the other underlying causes to what I'm experiencing that are at a spiritual level, that are an emotional level, that are a mental level, not just addressing the physical, but addressing what is my belief system? Because your belief system is huge in this thing. It's huge in this thing. If you don't believe in anything extraordinary, extra physical, paranormal, that's exactly what you'll experience. And that will just be confirmed to you over and over and over again. Because because the truth is, we have access to all of it, but we have to make ourselves accessible to it. We have access to spiritual resources for physical healing. We have access to spiritual resources for mental and emotional wellness. We have access to spiritual resources for financial abundance. We have access to spiritual resources that can help us and principles that can help us in our relationships. But if I don't make myself accessible to them, then they will not work. And it isn't just you either. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just me when the beings were saying, if you go back to sleep, you'll be lost and they won't find you. That was some kind of spiritual intervention. There was another story that I've shared, but I'm coming up on the end of my time here, so I'm not going to share it. But I had a couple more encounters like that through this healing process that happened for me. I did dream work. I did work with the subconscious. I did work on my attitude. I did work on my belief system. I could see where there were certain beliefs that had crept in that were contributing, maybe not the sole cause to the heart failure, but definitely contributing. There were emotional aspects, definitely contributing. I'd lost heart. I'd gotten out of alignment and out of step with my reason for being here. I got out of alignment with spirit. I had to realign with spirit. And people say, well, I'm not going back. I'm not going back either. In fact, even if you go through this process, and I want to affirm it's okay. If you go through this process of questioning, crisis of faith, deconstructing, and then as you continue on the path of the seeker, and you say, you know what? They don't really have the answers either. In fact, I would say scientists have fewer answers than some people in the church. That's going to piss some people off. Seems to be my gift. Say, I didn't find it here. I'm still seeking. My seeking led me out of someplace, led me out of the confines and constrictions of a toxic religious system. And I looked for answers in materialism, or I looked for answers in physicalism, or I looked for answers in New Age fairs, or I looked for answers in other spiritual paths, or I turned to Eastern paths or whatever. And it's not really delivering practically on a practical level the goods for me in my life. It's okay to go back. But the truth is, you're never going back. You've never been this way before. I've never been this way. I don't know what the next year holds for me, but I do know this, that I want to dedicate the rest of my life to sharing principles that work with people without the toxicity of the dogma, hopefully without just projecting myself out there onto everybody universally and dictating to them their experiences, without thinking that, oh, the people that are still following this are just dumb sheep, or they're just not as enlightened, or they just don't know as much as I. You see what I'm saying? And I know I slipped into that a little bit. So this is kind of my mea culpa and opportunity to take a fresh start. So I did a class that I'm still working. And again, I'm not able to devote myself full time to this. I want to get to the place in the next year. My goal is by my next birthday that I will be, just like last year, my goal was for my next birthday, I'd be perfectly healthy. My goal for this next year is that I can be relieved of my other job responsibilities so that I can really devote myself 100% to providing principles and opening up vistas of the spirit that will help people and empower people to go beyond and transcend even the limitations that they think that they have. So next month, I'm going to be doing I'm going to start in an attempt to move in that direction. I know there are many of you that have been contributing monthly to the work here. There just haven't been enough money coming in. It hasn't been enough money coming in to uh, for me to be able to have the freedom and the time to devote myself totally to that. So, what I'm going to be doing, and I'll be posting something hopefully later this evening. So, watch on my page if you're interested in this, but an opportunity for people to just partner with us to bring wellness and healing and empowerment to the seekers that are out there. I realize the cynics are always going to be there, and a lot of the cynics are going to drop off. A lot of the cynics have already let me know they're mad at me, or they're offended at me because they've taken things that I've said personally as though I was directing it directly at them. And even when I said I'm not directing it at them, they insisted that I was. But so what I want to do is in September, do a class on healing, uh, quantum healing, and really walk you through the steps that I took that brought me literally from a place where I was dying to a place where I'm the healthiest I've been in 20 years. And I've got the receipts. So, and I'm not saying that to brag about myself. What I'm saying is that it's valuable information that I think can help a lot of people. So I'm going to teach that. And so what I'm going to be asking for is I'm going to be asking for people that can make a donation monthly to help support the work that we're doing of any amount. There might be a small limit. I haven't decided that yet. But if you'll make that commitment, then I'm going to do that particular course both live and online for anyone that would make that commitment, and open to anyone that would make that commitment, but only open to people that would make that commitment. And then I'm going to follow that up with a with a class open to channeling. How do we become channels for spirit? How do we become channels for the invisible? Really looking forward to doing that class, and probably we'll do that one in maybe in October, but more than likely in November. So there's a couple things that are coming up. I'm still working on the website. I know there's one or two of you that you donated to attend the last class that I did on dealing with negative self-talk and unleashing your best self. Joe Mashuda has been helping me out with that. Really appreciate you for that, Joe. And he's waiting on me. I'm still designing the website so that we can get those courses up. But if you're out there, I know there's a couple of you out there that donated but weren't able to attend the live class. And I promised I would get the videos to you. Still in that editing process and getting that together. I haven't forgotten about you. But again, I'm doing this as a hobby. And what I'm asking for is people that will believe in this enough to say that, yes, there is something here to be offered to seekers. There is something here that can help make the world a better place. And you want to be a part of that. You want to participate in that with us by supporting us financially. Then I will be able to get things done more quickly. You'll notice if you followed my page that in July, I got a bunch of posts up. I did get quite a bit done on a couple of books that I'm writing. I'm going to be releasing at least one book before the end of the year, meaning in December, one book before December, and then hopefully another one, 2 or 3 before this time next year. They're in the process. It's a laborious process, but I was able to get a lot of that done by just having a couple weeks where I wasn't working, where I just devoted myself to that. And then now that life has picked up again, you've noticed that I've been less active and less able to post. So I'm asking for your help, and just letting you know where I'm at and the direction that I'm going to be going in the future. Love to have you be a part of it, even if you decide not to partner. One-time donation or even no donation at all. I hope you'll continue and be as excited as I am, because there's a lot in here, and a lot that I haven't let out because of my cynicism and lots of other reasons. And I plan on devoting the rest of my life to putting out principles that will work, and also the rest of my life to being a seeker and not a cynic. So how about you? Are you finding yourself, are you a cynic? Are you a seeker? Again, nothing wrong with being a cynic, but maybe there were some things in here that you didn't identify and about yourself And maybe you might want to make the choice to identify more with being a seeker. And if you want to do that, I want to say it's okay to do that. Welcome in. And we want to create a place. We want to create an online community. We want to create a local community where seekers can come together and ask the hard questions without getting a bunch of dogmatism, a bunch of dogma forced on you. Because again, spirituality is a personal path, personal choice, personal devotion. And we're all different. We all have different temperaments. We all have different personalities. We all have different values, things that we want from life, things that we don't want from life. And our spirituality should be able to reflect all of those things. So it should be, as Joe Mashuda says, a big tent. So anyway, thank you if you stayed with me for this entire video. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of the support. I really, really do. Thank you, those of you that have known about my health journey and have supported me through this last year. I really appreciate you. I couldn't have done it without you. And with that, I'm going to say God bless you. I hope you have a great day. And I will be back, not next Sunday, for sure the following Sunday. And I'll try to do some other stuff in between. I know I say that every week, and it just depends on how my week goes, how many clients I'm seeing, what's going on with my kids, all that kind of stuff. So once again, thank you. And I